How many of you guys have heard Dan say, Russell say, that the person who outspends their competitor wins? Now, how many of you guys know how to actually do that? Right. So we're going to go through how we actually do that so you can then confidently go spend that money and know that you know confidently what happens with that. So that's what we're going to talk about this morning, the maximum allowable cost to acquire a customer. This is the question. So if you were to do a private consulting day with Dan, this would be the first question he asks you. How much are you willing to spend to acquire a customer? Because this number is the number that tells you everything you need to know about your business. And the person who can spend the most money to acquire a customer will always win. Okay, so it's like back to math class. And if you guys are like me, I can't do math. This is the only math I can do. So we're going to do some easy numbers, right? But this is the math we need to know how to do. We don't need the algebra. We don't need the trig. We don't need the other stuff. But this is the stuff we do need to do. Now, what happens when we can spend more? Well, you actually have less competition because your competition can't keep up with you. You have more traction. You can do more. That snowball starts to move faster and faster and faster. You can pursue longer. Okay? So that means that you can extend the amount of time that you can go after a lead. So what happens is most people, they run any type of marketing. They're trying to get somebody to raise their hand, and then they immediately pounce on them, and they immediately need to make that sale. But your prospect hasn't been sitting around all day just waiting for your marketing piece to show up, being like, man, if that email comes across today, man, if I just happen to see that Facebook ad today, right? This is what I've been waiting my whole life for, and I've been sitting here, and my money's right here, and I'm ready to give it to somebody. That's not how they live their life. You came across while they're out walking, while they're sitting waiting for their kids to come from school, right? And then they get distracted 2 seconds later. So the more money you have to be able to pursue them, you got their attention. That's the hardest piece. Now you've got to stay with them. You've got to be able to pursue them. So on average, most businesses give up within 2 weeks of a new lead. Now, if you had the money to be able to pursue them for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks. Because how many people know when somebody's ready to buy? You guys all know what that trigger is? Kind of a trick question because there isn't one. We don't know when somebody's ready to buy. We'd like them to buy right now, but most people are not ready to do that. So the longer you can afford to pursue them, the more leads you have in your bucket. I always call it putting them in your own pond. I want to stock my pond so I can go fishing in that pond. Okay, then the longer you have to be able to work with that lead. Well, we need money to be able to do that. And then number 4, you can invest in retention. So this is a piece most people don't think about. But the easiest customer to sell to is the one who has bought from you previously. So if you now take some of your math and you put some of that money into your retention, you create a better business value. You create better customers, and you create more money on what we call the back end of your business, which allows you to afford more on the front end of your business. So it kind of all works in this whole circle, right? But a big piece of this is being able to then invest in retention, because if you can't invest in them once they've become a client because you spent all your money to be able to acquire them, then they start looking elsewhere for the next thing, right? Or they go someplace else where they're treated better. So retention is a big piece of this. And then number 5, you make your business more valuable. Because more valuable your customer is, the more valuable your business is. The more your customer repeat buys from you or refers to you or stays with you, the more valuable your business is. The more valuable your business is, the more you can spend to acquire a customer. Okay. All right. So the secret to growth and the secret to power is being able to spend a lot more to get, and to keep each customer, to be able to do more than anybody else in your category. Therefore, your number 1 job should be this, wherever my boards are. Your number 1 job should be able to figure out the math to be able to afford to spend more to acquire a customer. So it's understanding the math equation we're going to go through today, and you're going to actually sit there and do it. So if you don't have you all have notebooks, so notebooks and pens, so you're going to need the notebook and pen because I'm going to have you pull out a piece of that paper. And your job today is going to be to figure out how you can figure out the math for you to be able to afford to spend more to acquire a customer. And then your job is to go out and outspend your customers in all of your investments, in your new customer acquisition, and in your customer retention. Okay? So Dan always says, if you change your math, you'll change your business, and therefore you'll change your life. So if you want to change your business, if you want to change your life, we start by changing the math. And then that math also gives you the confidence. Because how many of you guys are like, I don't know, I'll spend $10 a day. Should I spend $15 a day? I don't know. How many of you guys feel that way? Like, I don't know. Only a couple of you guys? Everyone else is confident? All right. Okay. Yeah. But if you know that math, then you can know confidently how much you can spend, because we know confidently how much is going to come back to us, and therefore you can make that decision for your business. How far can I go in the red? How long can I go in the red? How long before that money comes back in? How much do I know I'm going to make when somebody becomes a customer? And then it's your job to go figure those things out and to put new things in place there. Okay, so the tale of two financial advisors. Call this anybody in your business, right? Advisor A, not number A. Advisor A is able to fly a qualified prospect first class in to meet with him. How many of you guys can fly your prospect in first class to meet with you? Anyone there yet? Okay. This is a financial advisor. When you're a prospect, to have that meeting with him, he's flying you in first class, putting you up in the hotel, all for that meeting. If he can't find $200,000 in tax savings, he pays that prospect $20,000. How many of you are willing to put $20,000 as the guarantee on your sale? He closes 100% of his sales. Who's going to compete with him? Right? Advisor B, he invites a 10-mile radius of his offer, which is a free retirement planning workshop and a free dinner. He invites everybody within a 10-mile radius. He offers a free consultation to meet with him. He's lucky to close 20%. Now, who do you think has a stronger business? A or B? Who do you think is making more money? Who do you think is crushing their competition? Right? Because their competition cannot afford to spend what Advisor A is doing. Now, Advisor A is not doing anything different than the systems and the marketing plans and everything that we are teaching you guys. Nothing different. The only thing is different is they change their math, therefore they change their business, therefore they change their life. The tactics, the strategies, all remain the same. So you don't have to be a financial planner, you put whatever your niche is that you are currently doing in A and B. This is what you get to decide. Then your job is, how do I make that my business, right? How do I make what I sell? How do I make my guarantee? How do I stand behind my guarantee? How do I do all of the tactical things that we talk about in order to be Advisor A and not Advisor B? And that's what we're looking at doing today. So how do we do this? It starts with knowing the MAC, the maximum allowable cost that you are willing to spend, and then we do everything possible to raise that number, to change that number. So what do I mean by that? Number one, you have to know what your current customer is worth. So on the first transaction, or within an X period of time, so maybe it's within 5 days, maybe it's within 30 days, how long can you live without extracting a profit from that customer? Okay. So I want you guys all to pull out a piece of paper. You're going to start with number one, what is my customer worth? And I want you to start thinking about, as I'm going through this, I want you to start thinking about what is your current customer worth? And I'm going to put up my examples here. We're going to walk through an example, but you can put in your numbers for your business. So on that first transaction, or within X period of time, how long can you live without extracting a profit from that customer? So let's say that I have a low ticket offer, or maybe I'm like a dentist or a local business. And let's say that on average, when a customer comes in, their first transaction is worth $200. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put $200 over there on the right-hand side of that. Okay. And then I want you to deduct your prefixed expenses per new customer. If you do not know that, if you know your overhead percentage, take your overhead percentage. So let's say my overhead is 60%. That means I need to subtract $120 from what my customer value. So that's $120. If you're at 50%, right, that's $100. If you're at 40%, right, you guys with me? Everyone good on that math? No. Explain that one again. Do you know what your overhead percentage is? No. Okay, so what you need to figure out is your prefixed expenses. So if you've got a building, we've got rent, right? We've got overhead. If you don't, if you're an info business, it's kind of like, what do I have to spend every month to keep the lights on? Divide that by my number of new customers. That's going to give me roughly my prefixed expenses. So if you're in an info business, if you're a coach, if you're a consultant, if you're working out of your house, right, you have actually a very low overhead. It's why people like info marketing. Your overhead might be 20%. If I've got rent and a building, my overhead might be 60 or 80%. Okay, so that percentage, that number, you figure it out for each one of you, and it ranges anywhere from 20% to 80%. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, then, now you have what that new customer is really worth. If I was going to deposit that, that's really what's getting deposited into the bank for each one of my new customers. Okay, so for me right now, I've got $80. Number 4. Now you get to decide on that $80, this is your choice. How much are you willing to cheerfully give to get a new customer? Are you going to give all of that? Are you going to give half of it? Are you going to give all of it plus 20%? Because maybe I know what happens in my business. Maybe I have my value ladder in place. Maybe I have my back end in place. Maybe I know that within 30 days, they're spending $500 with me. So I can go spend more than $80 to acquire that customer. I can go negative on that customer. So I'm going to say, I'm going to spend all 80 of it, which means I take home no profit on that first transaction. Everybody still with me? Okay. Now, that is what we call your maximum allowable cost to acquire a customer. That's how much you are willing to spend to acquire that customer. So mine is $80. So now let's look at what happens if we change any of those numbers. So let's say we're selling a high ticket. Okay. Let's say I sell a high ticket coaching program for $25,000. That's my first entry into my business. And so let's say I've spent $10,000. I got 100 leads. We're going to close 10% of those to a discovery call. On my discovery calls, we close 50% of our sales. Okay, so let's look at those numbers. So we spent $10,000 in marketing. We got 100 leads. 10% of them booked to a discovery call. 50% of those closed from my discovery call. So I take my $10,000 that I spent in marketing, I divide that by 100, and I get my cost per lead as $100. Everybody with me on cost per lead? Yes? No? Okay. I take my $10,000 that I spent in marketing, I divide it by my customers that I got. I got 10 customers, so it cost me $1,000 for every one of my discovery calls. I take my $10,000 I spent in marketing, I divide it by the 5 customers that I got. It says now that I'm spending $2,000 per customer. How many people think spending $2,000 to acquire a customer might be a little high? Couple people? Anyone think it's a little low? Couple people? Hey, how many people think it's about right? How many people didn't vote? I know, I saw a lot of hands that didn't vote. Because there's a lot of variables that go into that number, and that number is personal for you. So what everybody else is spending to acquire a customer or a lead, yes, you can use that as a benchmark, but that is not what you want to go off of. What you want to go off of is this math. You want to go off of what it means for you.
If you want to learn from the greatest marketing minds of our generation, then subscribe to our channel and check out these videos.